right, we are live. Wonderful, beautiful day. All right, so thank you for joining. If you are joining right now, feel free to say hello. Yeah, feel free to say hello and where you're tuning in from. Let's see where everyone is coming from. And yeah, we'll get started here soon. Wait for a few more people to join. And a really fun talk that I probably should have done a lot sooner. But nevertheless, we are going to talk about some really cool topics today. And yeah, excited to share. Just helping a few people jump online. All right, Chambersburg, PA. Awesome. We're over here in sunny Florida, where our second summer has begun. We were at the ocean the other day and thinking the sun was beginning to wane, but oh no. Came home red as a lobster. Yes, Jennifer knows what I'm talking about. The second summer has begun. We did a little bit of ocean kayaking. It was really fun. But that sun, it's a different thing down here. The sun's a different animal over here in Florida. Hey, Jane. Nice to see you. And Jerry. Nice to see you. Yeah, so go ahead, get yourself comfortable. If you're tuning in, say hello, say where you're from. And yeah, we're going to start here and we'll get underway. From Quebec. Wonderful, wonderful. Ghislaine Brunette. How are you? Nice to see you. Thanks for joining. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, another couple minutes and we will be started. How did everyone enjoy the solstice? Or solstice, I guess you call this equinox? Very powerful one. Very powerful equinox. It's always a powerful time during these changing of the seasons, eclipses. Always a time to pay attention to because there's almost always going to be a buildup, a pressure cooker, if you will, of reasons to expand. Old energies coming to the surface, new perspectives, new energies blossoming. So really good time to be conscious of what is changing in your own body. Earth goes through changes of the seasons, but we also go through many changes as well. So always pay attention to these times of the year. All right, so that'll do it. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. And yeah, some fun things to talk about. And I wish and hope that these list of things will help you as well in your journey, because when I was looking back, I was like, wow, it really changes how you perceive your own growth in your own journey when you have a little bit of experience. As they say, hindsight is 20/20. But, one of the first things that people are going to say is, well, if you didn't learn through that adversity, then you wouldn't have learned the lesson. Of course, learning is a huge part of the journey, and you can't take away your specific set of circumstances. However, there are ways to become more efficient. There are perspectives that allow us to learn more quickly, to learn more effectively. And that's what I'm going to be focusing on. Not I wish I never made that choice. That was so difficult. Because we learn through the difficulties, we learn through the adversity, and sometimes that's the only way a soul can learn. We have two ways of learning: having your hand held and having your hand slapped. And sometimes it takes that force, that shock, to change perspectives that helps us figure out a new way of thinking, behaving, doing, and so forth. So with that being said, I will begin my own introduction. So thanks for joining us. I'm Joseph Adams, and I have been a sincere seeker since day one. So to refine that, when I began my path through an out-of-body experience, it was through the sheer curiosity of having just initiated a process in which I began to levitate out of my body. I began to fly towards this white light tunnel, completely sober, completely conscious. And as I was floating out of my body, it was one of the most powerful experiences, because it felt like a near-death experience. Many of the near-death experiences say that, they see this white tunnel and they have that choice to go through or to stay. That's what it felt like for me when I had my out-of-body experience that catalyzed my whole spiritual path. That whole spiritual path began the day after that event, and I knew that there was something unique, there was something different about myself. There was something that I needed to explore, something to figure out. And so that started my journey. It wasn't influenced by religion. It wasn't influenced by God. It wasn't influenced by outside forces. It was, what did I just do? How do I replicate this? What is the meaning of this? So that's a big focal point of why people come to learn from me, why people come to hear what I have to say, because a lot of what my experience comes from is just my own practice through understanding the laws and the dynamics that are controlled in our dimension, meaning these fundamentals don't change. Humankind comes in and creates religion around something that was unchanging. And you can learn from those natural laws, and that's what I was trying to do. That's what I was trying to figure out, unbeknownst to me, was how do I initiate my focus and awareness to achieve this out-of-body experience again. And that process, that experience secured me to this evolutionary process that we're all participating in. And over the years, I began to backtrack and understand what I unlocked, how my third eye just blew open, releasing this incredibly powerful energy. How do I make sense of it? How do I do it again? And that began the journey of understanding the higher sensory that we have in the body. And over the years, I was instantly connected to the spiritual realm, working with my guides, working with understanding the ascension process, the evolutionary process of our minds, and how we are moving and transitioning from a disharmonic state of consciousness into the next, and recognizing the steps to take in between. What increases our frequency? What increases our perception? How do we let go of the weight that we hold on to with our minds? How do we achieve harmony? How do we find harmony? these are all the questions that I was focusing on and finding answers to as I went down my path. Slowly I started to get connected to energy healing. It came intuitively. And before I knew it, within a year, I was taking my first ever client, and they had a spontaneous Kundalini awakening on my very first client that I worked with. It was one of the most magical experiences where I knew, this is what I need to do. I need to understand energy healing. And I quickly rose to a credible level, known throughout my town, known throughout the shows I was going to, traveling around working on dozens and dozens of people all during these shows, and acquiring a vast amount of understanding of our consciousness. So this is where I'm coming from with a lot of my teachings, a lot of my practices, is this vast amount of experience of watching the human position of consciousness give catalysts and allow others to grow, allow them to transform, to provide that flame that lights the other candle. So that was the first couple years. And, so much knowledge, so much experience, so much learning. And, this information's going to be valuable to you. It's going to be able to help you save time. This is why all this information is going to be important. To release the frustration that comes from having to try to figure something out by yourself. There's so much uncertainty, but one of the most difficult parts is untangling what the mind does to an otherwise pure growth and evolution. So, with that being said, we will start the 5 things that I wanted to share, things that I wish I knew on my spiritual journey when I began. So, and we begin. So the very first thing that I wanted to share, so as I'm growing, as I'm learning these experiences and trying to teach others, trying to help others, help them understand and empower themselves, this is a really important thing, because we get so caught up in this: you are ascending, you're raising your vibration, you're growing, you're increasing in frequency, and all these little adjectives give us the subconscious sensation and feeling that we are moving upwards, that we are growing out of our bodies, and we're going to transition into this light body, and we're going to just vibrate out of the dimension. There's all this leaving the physical, moving into the non-physical. And when you hear it time and time and time again, subconsciously it makes it think that you're leaving. At least for me in my path. But I've come to realize that it's about balancing your energy. It's about balancing your potential. This is a huge one, and this really shifts your perspective, where you're not ascending and growing, and you're not trying to leave your body and vibrate out of the dimension. You're learning to balance the power that you have access to. And when you go through an activation or a big spiritual experience, you're all of a sudden have this huge influx of new energy, and it causes this vast experience of bliss and peace and expansiveness and sensations that you've never felt before. And it's mixing with your earthly 3-dimensional energies and causing this drastic contrast. And that's what you're picking up on. The new frequencies and energies that we have access to that have been lying dormant within the body. And you have an experience, and it opens you up, and that contrast is what causes this huge experience. So then you get obsessed with, I'm going to use my third eye. See, this is what happened to me, is I was obsessed with, I want to leave my body. I want to have an out-of-body experience. I want to open up my third eye. I want to go travel to new worlds and see new things. So you have this leaving. I was constantly attempting to draw all of my energy up through my body and out my third eye. So what this did over time, it served two things. In one sense, it was helping me. It was helping me expand the energetic field that's associated with your third eye. So I was very, very quickly opening up that portal, that lens that sees into infinity, that taps into infinity, that restores your potential. When you connect to the third eye a lot of times, you are letting go of all of the earthly sensations and feelings and thoughts, and you're transcending. So you're restoring yourself back to this potential, but it's beyond a lot of the earthly energies that we need to master. So I was obsessed with putting all of this force into my third eye. If I were to go back, I would shift my perspective and to recognize that I'm learning to balance my third eye. I'm learning to balance my connections with the divine. Not trying to leave my physical and merge with the non-physical. It's not about that. It's a complete illusion. It's a complete illusion. But the reality is you're learning to balance very, very powerful energies. And when they bounce around in your body, you don't necessarily know how to do that very well. And it takes time, and that's part of the human journey. That's part of the path of learning how to balance. Not trying to leave, not trying to vibrate out of the dimension, not trying to leave your physical. Now, of course, there are skill sets where, yes, you can leave your body. But those are practices. Those are practices that you can do that are extracurricular, that are not related so much to your own self-realization or your own relationship with your higher self or through God, through the Creator. So different paths, different understanding. So that's a big one, friends. That's a very big one. If I were to go back, I would learn to shift my perspective and to recognize that I'm learning to balance these powers. I'm learning to contain them and keep them under control. And I'll go ahead and say a little wisdom about this. Through the thousands of hours I've meditated and learned how to control my field, when you really start tuning into the higher frequencies, you become this force, this magnetic, polarized force. And it's more helpful to perceive your whole energy body as this toroidal field in which you have a connection, a plug that you're trying to connect to the divine that comes out your crown. Your crown connects to the divine, and you balance that connection. Just like a electrical socket going into a wall that supplies power. That's what your crown is doing. It's balancing. And then obviously your grounding. A plug coming from the bottom half of your energy, connecting into the earth and securing your foundation. And when any one of these plugs comes undone, it's a very common side effect of getting ungrounded. Not being able to fully visualize or bring back information. Falling asleep is a perfect example of one of those cords coming undone. Or having a visual and it not being clear. You have a lot of energy, but you don't have the clarity. So you have to reestablish that connection first. Freeze, reestablish that connection, and then continue your process. And if you still can't get the information, then you have to expand the mechanism that's bringing in the information. It's very simple in process. And so that really helped me is recognizing I'm a field with two connections with a lens that can increase and decrease my ability to perceive any given vibration or frequency, because they change your perspectives. The frequency that you're embodying gives you the perspective. So you shift in frequencies, you shift in perspectives. For instance, gratitude embodied creates a new perspective of a grateful life, appreciative life. You see things differently and so forth. So that's a really big one for me. Hopefully that relates to you as well. And next one that is very big on the list was obviously very related to this one, and that is grounding. If I could go back and do it again, I would put way more time and understanding and practice into grounding because I didn't recognize what it fully meant. In the beginning days, all that third eye work and trying to advance my consciousness out of body, which in one sense helping me, in another sense hurting me. I associated grounding in my very early days as lack of spiritual connection, lack of potential. And that's where I went wrong. Another example of going wrong and not grounding properly is you would have these meditations where, let's say you go kind of far, you say, oh, I went pretty far, and you end your meditation and give yourself a moment or two and say, okay, I'm ready to go do my day. You just spent 15, 20 minutes connecting to ethereal, non-physical energies, completely dissolving the sensation of your body, and yet you give yourself 2 minutes to reconnect and then go run around and do your day. You may not feel it the first time or the second or third or fourth, but over time, you're slowly peeling your energy off of your body. That's what happened to me in a very awful way. I was starting to have a lot of ungrounding symptoms that your higher power delivers to you, so you recognize there's something not right with your physical body because you're pulling all your vitality and life force off of your body. So you start getting these symptoms that start very subtle, and you might not even recognize them. But then you go back and you say, oh my gosh, my higher essence was trying to warn me by this sensation and this feeling that you're ungrounding yourself. So I would go back and rebalance the amount of time I spent pushing my energy out to reconnecting it back to the physical. Now, there's elementary ways of reconnecting yourself and grounding, and probably the first one you're ever going to hear when you start the journey is imagining roots coming out your feet and down to the earth. And that can be very, very helpful, and that might do the trick. But over time, there are ways in which you must use more comprehensive ways of acknowledging your entire body and pulling all of your energy back to your body as a whole. Like an egg contracting and expanding. So take that into consideration when you work on your practice. And there's another part I want to talk about ungrounding, and that is there are different levels of being ungrounded. You may not have the deepest spiritual connections, but you can still get very ungrounded within your sacral chakra, within your mental body. If you have an overactive analytical mind in which you can't settle and you can't stop repetitive looping thoughts, that's a perfect form and a perfect example of being ungrounded. Not necessarily what you think when you imagine ungrounding, but it still exists, and it's one of the most overlooked ones. So, thinking too much can pull your energy from your physical body. Same with sexuality. Not having your sexual energy controlled or contained can pull all of your energy into one position of consciousness. So there are many ways to be ungrounded, not just the stereotypical head in the clouds, very intuitive, very open, but lacking that earthly connection. And one of the most important questions that I can ask myself is, when I'm thinking about my body, when I'm thinking about grounding, is, do you feel comfortable being alive? Do you feel at home? That's such a big one. They're so many people out there who practice the spiritual path where they identify very strongly with a realm that is not human, be it ET, be it angelic, be it anything else. And they say, I'm more connected to this and this. And they actually change their own names and change their own identification. Say, I'm the soul of an archangel, or I am the elder of a ET group. That's a clear indicator to me that you haven't reached the full potential of grounding into your human flesh. Because when you feel the ultimate grounding, it's the most comfortable, the most secure sensation that you're ever going to feel while being in the human body. But we have so much potential to still open up, because a lot of us open up those spiritual energies first, connect with our non-physical guides first, feel the incredible vibrations and support that they have, and then unknowingly be more attracted to that than our own physical flesh form. It's the most common form of being ungrounded and the most overlooked as well, because it's rampant. It's rampant out there. And you can just do a quick look of people's profiles and they'll say, I'm an archangel twin flame, or something else that's completely showing me that they're not fully connected with the human. Because when you fully get into that human spirit, that's what you want to be connected with. Then again, that's my opinion. So moving on. So let's see if we got, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Feel free to say anything as we're moving forward, and I will periodically check what's going on the message board. So thanks again for tuning in, and we're going to keep on moving. So next thing up that I wish I knew, coming in at number 3, is that your success in your own evolution isn't dependent upon your knowledge. So let's say that again. Your success in your spiritual path isn't dependent upon your knowledge. It's dependent upon your sincere desire to become, just to be. Because this comes back to one of the truths of the dimension, that this is the dimension that is ruled by choice and how choice affects our consciousness, not knowledge. There's plenty of people who are really intelligent, really smart, they know it all, but they don't behave in the way that they know. They don't behave with the wisdom that they have inside of themselves. There's a lapse, because this isn't the dimension of knowing. It's the dimension of choosing. Through your choice, you yield an experience that hopefully inspires catalysts to evolve, to grow, to refine. And the sheer will of you wanting to achieve your goals is what the universe listens to. It doesn't necessarily listen to the voice in your head that knows everything. Sure, very helpful, and obviously there is a balance to knowing and not knowing. Because not knowing that the pure formless is the feminine embodiment. Now, there's very, very few people that are going to be able to do this evolutionary process without knowing anything. It's possible, 100% possible. They could just be so pure in their formless, creative energy, allowing that intuition to guide their own path. But we're a very mental society. We're very analytical. That left brain is very dominant, and we're going to want to know something. We're going to want to be comfortable with some steps of progress that gives us that order, that gives us that structure. So clearly knowledge is powerful, but it's not going to be the deciding factor of what makes you successful. Always fall back on your affirmations. Especially when we're dealing with difficult situations in which we don't understand how we're going to make it to the next step. Well, you don't have to know how. It's not about knowing how. It's about choosing that you wish to make it to that next step and applying your focus and attention to that affirmation, embodying that to the fullest, creating that frequency, and then the universe and the collective consciousness will match the magnetism that you're putting out. Now, you may not get, the response may not be what you expect. There are always situations in which you're going to be surprised. There's going to be curveballs. There's going to be experiences in which you think you want a desire or an outcome, only to find out along the path that it's now changed because it's about your magnetism. And deep underneath, when you find your highest passion, it may take you a lot of choices. But if you continue to be fueled by what gives you desire, what gives you that passion, then it's only a matter of focus and time until that divine purpose embodies itself through the choices, through the vibrational experiences. So your success isn't determined by what you know. It's determined by how strongly you want to succeed. So that's a very helpful one to keep in mind when you're on the path. And it takes a lot of faith. Faith is a very powerful component to the human energy field that is completely necessary for you to master. You must have a connection of faith. It's not a faith of about one thing or another. It's a frequency. That's what connects you to the unknown through the crown. So restore that faith and give yourself the affirming practice. Okay, so moving forward, now we're getting to number 4. And that is, I actually had some extracurricular ones. Let me make sure I'm saying my right ones. Okay. And the next one is that I wish I would have known a little sooner on my path. That would be very helpful. And that is that there is a design to your consciousness. To recognize that your specific and your unique consciousness has a design to it. In 2 ways. One that's personal to you within the choices, the desires, the dislikes that you personally have, and the goals that your soul wants to accomplish. There's a design to the way you're going to learn yourself through those likes and dislikes that's unique to you. But there's also a macro, comprehensive design to human consciousness on a whole. Now, and that this is what's woven into the dimension. This has nothing to do with religion. This has nothing to do with outside influences or philosophy. This is how it is. This is a truth that is a control. To recognize that your mind has a way that it evolves within the dimensions that we're in. It's unchanging. You can place substance and structure and understanding around these truths. You can build a religion around it, the truth of that. You must recognize, like for instance, love is the deciding factor of the next level of consciousness. And how you learn to understand, reflect, and embody love, to shift your perspective. That is one of the goals of this dimension. So much energy, it gets me so thirsty. Okay. Alrighty, so recognizing I wish I would have known the design a little bit more clearly, to recognize that the mind has a way of evolving. When you first start the spiritual journey and you have your first big spiritual experience, you have no idea what's happening. You have very little clue about how this incredible activation, spiritual experience relates to the whole of who you are. It feels haphazard. It feels random at times. It feels very confusing. There's a lot of uncertainty. Because remember, there is the process that we're learning to balance the power that we're being given access to. And when you have that in-stream of new frequency that causes that chain reaction, that causes your mechanism of growth, you're learning to balance this energy. And it can be very confusing as it hits and as it runs into your lower earthly perspective that is about to shift. Because we have this propensity to stay attached to the old and be deterred by the change that is in front of us. But this evolutionary process is really important to understand, really important to know, in that we do have a shape of how just understanding, for instance, that love is the goal of the dimension, how you can implement love, compassion, empathy, appreciation, and gratitude, these emotional keys, learning how to implement them into your earthly life, your earthly perspective and experience, that's going to gift you the harmony of the next level of consciousness, because that's what it's about down here. Finding harmony, becoming harmony. That's the big one. So I wish I would have understood a little bit earlier that there is a design of consciousness, and that there are particular energies that will be more rewarding than other extracurricular practices. For instance, I wish I would have put more time and practice into gratitude, into the blue ray throat chakra, first of the spiritual energies, and are related to the next level of consciousness, otherwise known as the Christ consciousness. When you recognize the power of gratitude, appreciation, reverence, devotion, these frequencies, this is the key. This is where if you just put all of your practice into those four things, you would be harmonized. You wouldn't need to put any time into your third eye. You wouldn't need to put any time, or very little time into these other extracurricular activities, because that's the goal, is learning those vibrations. Now, when you have the expanded energy field, it makes the introduction of gratitude or reverence, it completely enriches your connection to another degree that's nearly incomprehensible. So you don't have to be fully spiritual to be a master of gratitude, but when you are and have those spiritual energies open, they become more meaningful because those frequencies mix and match together. So if I were to go back, I would put more practice into the design of consciousness, which says your key to harmony is going to be through reverence, appreciation, gratitude, because through the embodiment of those frequencies, the wisdom will be coming through. Becoming those vibrations yield the wisdom that you're looking for. So remember, you don't have to know the wisdom of gratitude at all. But when you find that moment of appreciation and embody it without the mind's interference, that's where we give time to germinate and sprout a new consciousness. So I would put more time into that practice right there, that gratitude practice. So remember that one. It will be integral one way or another if you continue the path. Maybe not now, but it will be at some point in time. All right. So, and then the last one that I would say, I wish I knew The last thing I wish I knew about the spiritual path, and I picked this one because I felt it would be a little bit more helpful for people versus like my own personal choice. I do have a few other runners up, but I'll say this one because I feel it's more important, because there's a lot of confusion around it and a lot of uncertainty about this other term. So I'll come out and say, I wish I would have known this when I started my spiritual journey. The difference between meditation and self-inquiry. Think about that for a second. Because all we hear is about meditation, especially when you're new to the path, you're new to the process. You're like, what is meditation? You think it's just sitting there, just being nothing, not doing anything, like wasting time. I actually thought that when I was younger, my early, probably late teens, like meditation just feels like a waste of time. Because you don't know what it is. You don't know what it yields to. So meditation and self-inquiry can be different things. And what granted me the success that I've had, it's because I have been practicing self-inquiry through the clear meditative lens. The clarity and the focus that I had to inquire about myself and to ask, why do I have this feeling? Become blank and clear and see what comes up, observe what comes out, listen to what comes out, and just pay attention. So the self-inquiry yields self-realization. But I didn't recognize that's what I was doing. I just called it meditation. But that can be slightly misleading, because I started to see like other people saying they're doing meditation, but they're just sitting there. They're just getting themselves still. They're just slowing down the waves of their emotions and minds. And that's obviously a huge part of self-inquiry and meditation. Those are big aspects to it. But that's just the beginning. Settle the waves of the mind and the emotions. And then the inquiry begins. Where someone who's just meditating, they might just settle the mind, settle the emotions, and then just stay in that position and receive those benefits. But for me, if you want to achieve the highest potential the human energy field has, then it must be done through inquiry. You must recognize what you are. There are times where you need catalyst. And if you're just meditating without any directive or focus, you may just be kind of sitting there, peaceful that you may be, balanced, stress-free as you may be, but it's the inquiry that continues the quest of truth. So big. I wish I would have understood that way sooner, because I would have explained it to people. When I say, I've meditated thousands of hours, so what? Those thousands of hours, if you're just sitting there doing nothing, that's not worth very much to me. The recognition of what the self is what's valuable. Because when you get in contact with what the true self actually is, you're in a constant state of inquiry until that becomes possible. Now, let me just give a disclaimer and say that I've learned through inquiry to quiet the mind, so the mind is no longer in the process. There are higher forms of analytical abilities that come when the mind is silenced. So in the beginning, it's the mind that says, why do I have anxiety? Where is this coming from? You're actually saying that in your own mind, and then you freeze, feel that anxiety, and observe where it's coming from, observe the new thoughts that get pulled out, and so forth and so forth. Then eventually you don't have those heavy energies anymore. Then you're operating well beyond the confines of the mental body. The mental body, it's so difficult for me to tell people, for you to understand and to comprehend how limiting your mind is. It's unbelievably limiting. It is a narrow bandwidth. If you were to take the whole rainbow and then take a very small slice of one small color and say, this is all you have to perceive the whole, that's like the equivalent. And it's very frustrating because to try to help people learn about the spiritual path when they're very dominant in their minds, they're very dominant in their rational, analytical, mechanical, scientific understandings of what is just physical, which is, once again, a very small slice of reality. Science knows this, physics knows this, but yet you pay no attention to the non-physical phenomenon that is happening every moment. And this is what's very frustrating, is because when you become that contained in your mind, you become very physical, very materialistic, where materialistic in the sense of only identifying what is physical, Newtonian type gravity, things you can measure, and the speed of momentum and inertia, and those types of constitutions. But it's self-limiting, and that's what's difficult. So that mind aspect is very important in the beginning because it shows you what's going on in your mind. Why, you use that mind, that voice, turn it inward and say, what's going on with me? Why can't I get this done? Why can't I achieve my goal, my success? And then that takes you on a non-physical journey where you can quiet that mind and just tune into the feelings. And then once you get out of the dark shadow aspects, and then it just goes into understanding what your actual field is and the multidimensional nature of how much space is inside of you. It's incredible. It's incredible. So that's a big one that I would redefine for people, is that there's a difference between meditation and self-inquiry. Self-inquiry led me to one of the few times I had a spontaneous Kundalini rising. That was which I'll never forget. It was the most incredible sensation. To give you a very short example of what happened in that story, I was listening to one of the great saints who teaches on self-inquiry, which I didn't know he did that at the time. I just happened to be doing that practice and recognize there's a saint that's what he teaches. His name is Sri Ramana Maharishi. And I was listening to one of his lectures, and as I was meditating, taking in all the information, he said something very valuable. And in that moment, I let go of these shadows or issues I was trying to wear. I let go and said, that's not me. That's not the real self. I let it all go, and this huge weight came off me, and then boom, Kundalini literally just rose from my base of my spine up out of my head. And to give you an example, it's this huge rush, surge of energy. Takes about, a few seconds, a few moments, and it just rushes out the top of your head, releasing one of the most ecstasy-filled moments of your life. That has a half-life of maybe, a good 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, 7, 8 hours, something like that, as it kind of, begins to settle. And unfortunately, it could last longer, but it's that mind, it's that ego that comes in with its sharp edges of definition as it moves through life, taking away the beauty. But anyways, that self-inquiry, understand the difference between meditation and self-inquiry. And that was number 5 for me. So I'll give a very close runner-up. For me, this is probably be in my top 5, but I think for other people, I'd say the other ones are more important. I wish I knew of those who were the masters of our time. I wish I would have put more energy into learning about them, their paths, and the things that they taught, because I didn't learn it right off the bat, and I recognize how important that is in this day and age. So I wish I learned more about some of my teachers, the great Sri Haidakhan Babaji, the Mahavatar Babaji that's spoken about in the book by Yogananda. Also learn more about Yogananda, learn more about Neem Karoli Baba, who was the guru of Krishnadas, Ram Das, many others. And Sri, as I mentioned before, Sri Ramana Maharishi. These individuals reached the Christed state. And also, obviously, Jesus, learning more about Jesus. And to learn more about these great saints and to understand and connect with their teachings, connect with their names, because it brings you to them. It brings you to that harmony that's very difficult to find in any other place. There are few humans that resonate with the transformation. So I wished I would have learned way more about them in way sooner, because they have been a light, a undying light that has given me an enormous amount of support, understanding about higher consciousness. Because I'll tell you right now, when you start to get to the higher levels, back on. Am I reconnected, everybody? You still hear me? Okay, cool. Had a little scare there. So, so I was just getting ready to end this conversation, and those are the top things. Those are the top things that I wish I would have taught on, and things I wish I would have learned or known more on my spiritual path. So I'll recap them one more time for everybody. That is learning to balance my energy, learning to understand the difference between balancing your energy versus trying to just leave. Am I still on here? Okay. Still on. One quick second. Turn this off. Okay, so learning to balance the energy. That's a big one. Learning to balance. Learning to be more grounded. Learning to recognize that there's a shape to your consciousness, and understanding the difference between inquiry and meditation, recognizing and understanding the masters who have walked the earth. They do have books, they do have resources out there, and when you connect to their books, you connect to their spirits, and their spirits are all encompassing, in which all exists there. So, that does it for my talk, everybody. That does it for my talk. And if you want to learn more about the things I'm teaching about, I do have a couple specials happening right now. I have a lecture series, a 16-week program that's all recorded already. If you want to learn more about lucid dreaming, working with crystals, how the mind evolves, everything that I've been speaking on tonight, this is a great way to learn more, support the channel, support this work. And the other way, now I was kind of hinting on this before, is that we need catalyst at times. If we're just meditating all the time with no catalyst, we need something to allow us to transform into change. That's where the group healing offering that I have, we do this 2 times a month, in which I channel 2 energies a month to a group of people around the whole world. And this energy can help give you that catalyst, can help you get the necessary charge to continue that evolution, to continue that restoration, to continue your own growth. It's a really beautiful self-care practice as well. And those 2 things are, those are my 2 main offerings. If you want more info, please do #info and I will get back to you. So if you're listening now, if you listen to the replay, do #info and I will come find you. And yeah, so that does it, everyone. I really appreciate everyone tuning in to me tonight and listening to these magical words I had to share with everyone. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your support. Literally could not do this without you. So I feel very blessed and very appreciative of the path that I'm walking. It's from you that I have the ability to share, to teach, to grow, to evolve, and to bring back this information and allow you to be more efficient. Because I know everyone doesn't have the amount of time that I do to put into this. But I come back, share that wisdom, and help you make more of the time that you do have. So it's a symbiotic relationship that I have with the community, and I really appreciate it. So much love to everyone. All right, so feel free to reach out to me if you need to. I'm here to answer questions and share. So that being said, take care and have a nice evening.